You all know this. Joe's just doing a great job as our acting president. We lost our president to the administration. Is Byron here? Jim, are you here? There's our I guess, recused president, and he's the acting archivist and doing a great job working for Marco Rubio, one of Marco's 10 jobs in the administration. Listen, I'll be very short. We want to get Senator McCormick on video here in a moment, but it's great to see so many good friends, see Gavin and Jim and Ambassador McMullen and Chris Cox. We were at the White House this morning, the Kilbergs. Just Chad, thanks for speaking to us tonight. We went to the White House this morning and did something very special. We gave the Architect of Peace Award to the President of the United States. And we had Trish and Ed Cox and Chris there. The family that was there was really, it was nice for her to come home. Of course, the only two people who got stopped and wanted and couldn't get into the White House were myself with the White House badge and Trish Nixon, who lived there. But other than that, it was all great. And we had a wonderful time with the president. And I'll just tell you very briefly, giving the award to the president meant a lot to me because I told him two things in 2019. Number one, and Chad will remember this, I told him you're the greatest hostage negotiator in U.S. history. You've brought more Americans home than any president certainly in my lifetime and in U.S. history. And the press gave me a terrible time about it. They said, the New Yorker magazine said I was just flattering the president to get a better job. I did get the NSA job. I'm not saying that's why, but that came after. And then after we got Baghdadi, I went back to the president in his study, his den behind the Oval Office. And I said, Mr. President, this is a big deal. And didn't use the Biden big effing deal, but I said, this is a big deal. And I said, but this is not what you're going to be remembered for. You're going to be remembered, your legacy is going to be that of being a peacemaker. You're going to be the greatest peacemaker president we've ever had. And he kind of looked at me and wasn't quite sure about that. And maybe didn't sound tough enough. But then we got the Abraham Accords, we got the Serbia-Kosovo deal. And 2 or 3 other deals. This term, he's gotten 7 peace deals and ceasefires, or maybe it's 8, in places most people have never even heard of, and places that don't affect American interest, but that he wants to stop the killing. I mean, he talks about Africa or the Caucasus or the Balkans. He wants to stop civilians from being killed. And so, at the time, both the hostage negotiator statement and the peacemaker statement were in doubt. People criticized me, they ridiculed me, they mocked me. After what happened earlier this month in Gaza, I don't think either of those points are up for debate anymore. And so for us to be able to go with the Nixon family and to give the Architect of Peace Award to the president was a great honor today. So I just want to share that with you. We're going to sit down, we're going to have a little talk with Dave McCormick, a great senator from Pennsylvania, and one of the reasons we're in the majority. And then turn you over to have dinner. So thank you very much. God bless you all, and God bless America. Thank you. Okay, Senator, can you see me?
Yes, I can. Hey, Robert, how are you?
Senator, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I can hear you.
Hey, it's great to see you, sir. I know you got a vote tonight, and so we miss you here in person, but thank you for making an accommodation and joining us by video.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a real honor to be with the Nixon Foundation on a topic of grand strategy, which, of course, President Nixon was truly a great president in that respect. And it's great to be with you on the day that you gave the president the Architect of Peace Award. I was in the Oval Office after you with some other senators, and he made a special point to show us the award and to talk about his commitment to and record on bringing peace through strength. So it's great to be here with you, particularly, Robert, because you're not only a good friend, but I'm a deep admirer of all you've done. And the Nixon Foundation is very fortunate to have you as its chair.
Well, thank you, sir. And we were hoping to have Dina tonight too, but so give your beautiful wife our best. And let me ask you about today. So this is a funny thing. You know, I used to have walk-in privileges at the Oval Office. I could walk into the East Wing, into the residence, see the president. I walked out. The president gave us a little tour of the colonnade that has all the photos of the presidents, and I saw you and a bunch of other senators standing over in the Rose Garden. And I happened to mention to the handler who was with us, do you mind if I just walk over there and say hi to the senators? And she said, sir, you can't go that way. The Secret Service won't allow you to. It's tough being a has-been, but anyway, I would ask you, you had lunch with the president on the beautiful new Rose Garden, the little bit of Mar-a-Lago in Washington. And tell us, what's the strategy for the shutdown and what's going to happen?
Well, I mean, I think it starts with the shutdown's really unfortunate. And, I stand before you as someone who would never support a shutdown of the government as a political matter, regardless of which party's in the majority and regardless of which party's in the White House. And I share that sentiment with my fellow Pennsylvania senator, my friend, Senator Fetterman. We both have made that point very public. I think what's going on here is the Republicans were trying to...
Senator, you're getting a round of applause here. I don't know if you can hear that, but the crowd is applauding you.
Yeah, well, great. That's, that's funny. Of all the things I've done since I've been in the Senate, I'd like to think I've got a pretty good track record for Pennsylvania. The thing that I get the most positive feedback on is my attempt at bipartisanship, and particularly my relationship with Senator Fetterman. So I'm glad to get that recognition. But in the end, I think this is purely politics. I think that this is the Schumer shutdown because I think the Democrats are trying to both penalize President Trump and show their strength of resistance to President Trump. And the reality of it is that a clean continuing resolution is something that both parties have supported historically and 14 times during the Biden administration. So, the one thing that they always taught me in the 82nd Airborne Division as a platoon leader is the thing you don't want to get into is a cul-de-sac. And I think the Democrats are in a cul-de-sac. They're trying to hold the government hostage to changes in the extension of the subsidies under Obamacare, which of course is going to be a very meaningful discussion once the shutdown ends. They're trying to change some of the provisions in the big beautiful bill, but that all needs to be done in normal course. And to hold the government hostage essentially hurts air traffic controllers and border patrol and the military. And in Pennsylvania, we got 2 million people that receive SNAP benefits. They're not going to get those. So unfortunately, I don't see an end in sight, but I'm hoping as the pressure mounts, cooler minds will prevail in the Democratic Party. I must say from today's lunch, I think the Republican side in the Senate is very unified. We're not unified on everything, but we're certainly unified on this shutdown. And I think the president and his team are very unified as well. So I think it's going to take a while, unfortunately. I think that's a sad commentary on our political system.
No, I agree. And the fact that the GOP Senate caucus is unified and we don't have a gang running around, a gang of five or that sort of thing is pretty amazing. It's been a long time in anyone's lifetime in this room that we've seen the GOP caucus so unified, and you're doing a great job there. So our Army careers are very similar. We were both in tip of the spear units. You were 82nd Airborne. I was a JAG officer, so kind of the same experience. Let's go to combat and what's going on in the Middle East. So President Trump had his second big peace agreement in the Middle East. He had the Abraham Accords in the first term, and they had the Gaza deal in this term. The Gaza deal looks a little shaky now. Hamas, no surprise, isn't giving up their guns. They're shooting Israeli soldiers, or some splintered group of Hamas or jihadi group is attacking Israelis. The Israelis are fighting back. The president had a very strongly worded tweet this morning. What do you make of this, and what's going to happen? Is the ceasefire going to hold, and how are we doing there?
Well, listen, I think the moment we're in is truly historic, and I think we're on the precipice of potentially the Abraham Accords 2, something that Abraham Accords 1, Robert, you were very involved in, my wife was involved in, and this is only it could have happened under President Trump, and I really believe this to be true. If none of this is by accident that we've had this first breakthrough. Just imagine the following conditions: to have wholeheartedly supported Israel's responsibility, really, to take out the terrorist threat posed by Hamas and Hezbollah, to stand strongly with Israel, to stand with Israel with military capability to take out the nuclear capacity in Iran, and yet to also have the strength of character to hold Israel accountable and to tell Prime Minister Netanyahu that, listen, we need to do more on the humanitarian front. Then simultaneously to have the kind of relationships he has with the Arab world, the Arab leaders, the Gulf states, only those conditions would have allowed him to broker this agreement. And, Dean and I have been to Israel a number of times. We went soon after October 7th. I mean, this is a watershed moment. And thank God phase one has allowed for the release of the living hostages. We still have to get the remains home of those that were killed. But we're one step closer to really eradicating the military capability of Hamas. And if Hamas stands down, I think that there's a pathway to peace and opportunity for everyone in the region. Abraham Accords too. And if it doesn't stand down, I think now the president set it up in a way that he has the Arab world behind him, because it's very clear that the source of obstruction is the militant terrorist side of Hamas. So it's a chessboard. I think the president has played it brilliantly. I'm hopeful, but listen, this is a very tough region, as you know, and it may take some fits and starts, but I think the circumstances are unprecedented and the result of the unique diplomacy that the president's brought to bear.
No, I agree. That's a great exposition. Just for a moment, share with the audience what it was like, because I went as well to Kibbutz Nir Oz, into the music festival site after October 7th. It changed Lomri and me forever. Ambassador McMullen, who's here, was with us on that trip to Israel. That was really a somber moment. Share your thoughts on what it was like to be in Israel after October 7th and what they went through on that day.
Yeah, it really horrific in the following sense. We went probably 6 or 7 weeks after October 7th, and we walked through a number of the kibbutz that were right on the border, and you saw it firsthand, Robert. I'm sure you saw it. The blood stains were still there, the houses marked, the safe rooms where the Hamas had kicked down the doors and tortured and killed parents, burned families. It's so horrific. You can't believe it's true. You're staring pure evil in the face. And, my conclusion coming away from that was, you can't live 600 meters away from people who want to slit your throat in the middle of the night. And so this terrorist wing of Hamas or terrorist Hamas organization has to be destroyed. It has to be eradicated. And the Israeli forces really have executed that campaign brilliantly. And I also came away from that with a deep appreciation for the existential risk faced by Israel. And I think what happened on October 7th reaffirmed that. Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania is a huge Jewish population. My hometown of Pittsburgh, we have a huge Jewish population. We live in Squirrel Hill, right around the corner from the Tree of Life. And this affected the entire Jewish community. So October 7th was the first surprise attack, but the second surprise attack we saw was the anti-Semitism that reared up on our nation's campuses. University of Pennsylvania, Harvard, MIT. I mean, this I'm not Jewish, but I knew anti-Semitism lurked, but I was deeply shocked by how pervasive it was. And so that was the second lesson, that we need to fight terrorism abroad, but we also need to fight radicalism and anti-Semitism at home. And I think, in the horrible 2 years since, I think we've made great strides on both counts, but we have to stay vigilant.
Well, your election was a huge part of that, so God bless you for that. So keeping with the parade, we'll go on to better subjects in a moment, but as we stem the parade of horribles, you were just in Finland, Denmark, Estonia, on a Kodel, taking a look at the front lines of they call it the Eastern Flank. I call it the Eastern Front. It's not a flank; it's a front. How are we doing there with Russia? How's NATO holding up, and what's going to happen in Ukraine?
Well, it was for me a remarkable visit. We were with Dean and I were with the majority leader and 4 other senators, and we, first of all, my big takeaway is, number one, these countries, it was Estonia, Finland, Norway, Denmark, they fear for their lives. For them, the idea that Ukraine is the first step towards a broader Russian expansion is not a theory of the case. It's to them the reality. That's what they believe in their hearts and souls is underway, and they're acting with they're acting with their pocketbook and with their military capabilities. All of them have committed to 5% or more GDP spending. I mean, they see the Russian bear in the case of Finland, 80 miles over the horizon. They see this as the beginning of a broader Russian expansion, and they're feeling the threats of this every day. Drones coming into their airspace, people trying to penetrate the border. They're being tested every day. So for them, this isn't theoretical. This is a reality. And so for them, what's happening in Ukraine is existential. How NATO responds, how Russia is brought into check is existential. That was the first key takeaway. And it was very different. We subsequently went to Italy. It was a very different sense of the risk and the exposure.
The Italians aren't too worried.
The Italians aren't worried like the Finns are. The second big takeaway, and these things are sometimes hard to recognize when you're in the middle of them, but I am convinced that we are in the midst of a revolution in military affairs, unlike anything any of us have experienced in our lifetimes. I was in the military 9 years. This was 30 years ago, and we used to talk about revolution in military affairs. But what's happening in Ukraine? What's happening with drones? What's happening with interceptors? What's happening with robots on the ground? Combined and blended with traditional artillery, there is a completely different set of tactical lessons of how we're fighting the next war. We met with the commanding general of U.S. Army Forces in Europe, who's a Pennsylvanian, and the lessons that are being extracted are critical. And we in America, even if we're not boots on the ground in Ukraine, and I don't think we should be boots on the ground in Ukraine, we need to get deeply embedded in understanding those lessons, because those lessons will repeat themselves in any future conflict with China, Iran, Russia, whomever it is. And we need to be mindful. We've got a bad history of fighting the last war. I'm fearful if we're not very vigilant, we're gonna repeat that mistake. Listen, in terms of what happens next, my view is the president's got the right framework, which is stop the fighting on the current lines of demarcation, a European security force that makes a strong commitment to the sovereignty of Ukraine, backed by United States weaponry, but not boots on the ground, an economic deal that creates a deterrent to Russia and also helps offset the cost of U.S. support. If anybody can get that done, it's the president. And I think he's going to have to be tough with Putin, which he has been. And I've been one of the co-sponsors of a sanctions bill to get tougher with Putin if we need to, a secondary sanctions bill, because the only way that Putin is going to respond is if he feels pressure and strain. And I think he's going to feel that and does feel that with President Trump.
Well, I think the bill is great, and it's a great arrow for Trump to have in his quiver to hold, to show Vladimir Putin that you can deal with me and do a deal, or you can get the sanctions from the Senate and have him put secondary sanctions on China. So it's a great bill. Thank you for co-sponsoring it. You raised the point about our military industrial base, which is waned and that sort of thing. The big beautiful bill, Pennsylvania is leading the charge to rebuild our defense industrial base. The big beautiful bill put $5 billion into the Philly shipyard to rebuild our Navy and protect us against not only the Russians, but the Chinese and the Iranians, as you point out. Tell us about what's going on in Philly with that big $5 billion that's coming in to rebuild the shipyard.
Yeah.
I assume you probably had a little something to do with that, I assume.
Yeah, it's very exciting. I mean, there's a bunch of big revolutions underway. For Pennsylvania, the intersection of artificial intelligence and energy is a key area of opportunity. And as you say, defense reindustrialization is a huge part. If you think that our military's behind in terms of next generation weaponry, sometimes I think, convince ourselves that because we spend a lot more money than China on our defense budget, that we're in great shape. I would argue that a disproportionate amount of that is spent on existing platforms, and a very small percentage of that budget is spent on next generation, where if you look at China's budget or some of the other militaries in the world, a disproportionate is spent on asymmetric warfare, next generation warfare. So I think this is a race that we've got to step up our game dramatically. And Pennsylvania, I think, can be a key part of that with robotics and AI in Pittsburgh.
Carnegie Mellon and the universities there and the industrial base is ground zero for this.
It really is. And the Hanwha is a great example. They bought the Philadelphia shipyard. They've invested $5 billion or are investing. That's 5,000 new jobs. We're going to go from creating one ship a year in Philly to 20 ships a year. And this is just the beginning. There's also Rhodes, which is a submarine component manufacturer that works with electric boat. That Philadelphia shipyard is going to grow dramatically. And listen, you know this, Robert. We have lagged. We have less than 1% of global shipbuilding capacity. It's a disgrace. We got a lot of work to do. The president is very committed to this. Secretary of Navy John Phelan, great guy. Pete Hegseth, a number of us in the Senate. We're going to make a big push into shipbuilding, and Philadelphia is going to be a big part of it. Pennsylvania is going to be a big part of defense reindustrialization.
I was just over at OMB talking to Russ Voughts, shipbuilding guys, and they're really fired up about Philly and what you're doing there. So that's great. Listen, we've been very generous with your time. We're going to wrap up with a final question here and let you get back to the Senate, to the people's business in the Senate. But you and Dina wrote a great book and that just came out, and I urge everyone here to get a copy of Senator McCormick and Dina Powell's book. It's really a tremendous book. But you talked about going to visit a friend of mine, someone who became a good friend later in life, Henry Kissinger, after you lost your first Senate race, and how Henry inspired you. Now, Henry's very important to people here at the Nixon Foundation, of course. He was a board member for many years and was President Nixon's right-hand man and confidant and partner in his foreign policy. Tell us a little bit about Henry Kissinger. He's just a lovely guy, and it was great to see that he inspired you to go back and try again and get yourself into the U.S. Senate.
Yeah, I had the great fortune of getting to know him late in his life, but we were friends for probably 10 years. But during COVID, I called him and checked in, and I said, "How are you doing?" And he said, "I'm doing terribly because no one can come visit me. I'm stuck here in my home in Kent, in Connecticut. I can't hear very well, so it's hard to speak on the phone." And I said, "Have you heard about Zoom?" And he said, "No, what's Zoom?" And I said, "Okay, stay tuned." And I sent a team up there, and they built him, sort of set him up on Zoom with a big screen, and his team could get him on. And he started to become a Zoom aficionado. He would do Zoom calls with foreign ministers. So we really became friends. And when COVID ended or became safer, he started to invite me up for regular lunches. And I would go see him, and he kept saying, "You should run for public office." And I said, "Geez, I don't know, Henry. Nobody knows me. I'm not well known." And he was writing his book on strategy at the time, on leadership at the time. And he handed me the chapter on Charles de Gaulle. It was in draft form. And I went home and read it. And I called him and I said, "I don't really understand. I read it, very good, but what's the lesson for me?" He said, "The lesson is Charles de Gaulle was a one-star general no one had ever heard of, and he declared himself the president of Free France. You can do this." And so that was the inspiration, and we talked, and I finally jumped into the Senate race in Pennsylvania. And
You're getting a bunch of applause, Senator.
yeah, so I lost the first race by 900 votes in the primary, and Henry called me the day after the election, day after the announcement. It was a recount, and he said, "Come for lunch." And so I went to lunch, and his team welcomed me in. They were all dressed in bow ties and very formal. And we sat down to lunch, and it was a very fancy lunch of wine and filet mignon and lobster tail, just the two of us. And I said, "Henry, my goodness, what a lunch. How could you eat like this every day and not gain weight?" And he said, "Well, this is a very special lunch. I wanted to honor you, that you were willing to do this." He said, "And under different circumstances, I would have hosted a big lunch or dinner in New York, but I wanted to honor you. I'm so proud that you did it. And I hope, I'm not sure I'll be alive to see it." I think he was 99 at the time, but I hope that you'll do it again. And I think you should. And sure enough, I did it again, and it worked out the second time. None of it would have happened without Henry Kissinger, who also did a fundraiser for me, which I'm told was one of the only, if ever, fundraisers he had done in his life. But he said, "I want to support you in any way I can." So a great American, a unique contributor to America's history and America's exceptionalism, and a dear friend and someone I admire deeply.
Well, he's a great man, and I owe you thanks for teaching him how to use Zoom, because I think it may have been his last speech in public. We went down to honor Jim Baker at the Baker Institute, and it was supposed to be Kissinger, Hillary Clinton, and myself to go down and honor Jim Baker. And that day, unfortunately, Henry had a terrible fall and actually broke a rib. And lo and behold, we get up to the stage and we look up and like you now, Henry's on TV, on Zoom. And he, notwithstanding the fall and the fact that he was injured, he did a 30-minute speech to the Baker Institute in Houston on Zoom, and it was just marvelous. So we owe you thanks for that.
He's a great American.
Well, listen, Senator, we'll let you go vote and go to the people's business, but we're going to call you Senator. It's now Senator de Gaulle, I think. That's what we'll call you now. Thank you very much for being with us, and God bless you.
Ambassador.
God bless
Thank
America.
you all. Have a great night. Thank you so much.